Hi all, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to create an Azure Virtual Machine and connect to it using SSH via either Azure Cloud Shell or a local terminal. So this is the Azure portal. So the first thing we want to do is to create a resource or come to this panel and look for virtual machine, which is this, or from this search bar we look for virtual machine. Just anywhere that you can find the virtual machine or the compute service on Azure, right? So click on this, and from here we can create our virtual machine and Azure Virtual Machine, and it will bring out this page where we'll do the basic configuration for our virtual machine. So basically, when you want to start out with creating resources in Azure, it starts with the subscription, which is the account where Azure is going to bill. So in this account, I have only one subscription. So by default, we are going to choose Azure Subscription 1. And here it requires to create a resource group. A resource group is like a container or a folder where you can create a group of resources. Then from here I have two resource groups. This is the one D, and then storage ACC resource group. Then I also have another resource group, and this comes by default, and network watcher RG. All these ones come by default. So it's either I create a new resource group from here, or I choose any of the options for resource group here. So I think we should go with this first one. It doesn't really matter, and the pattern of naming your resource group when you want to create a new one, you can just give it a name that perhaps you have other resource groups created in your Azure account. So you want to make sure that the name you are going to give your new resource group does not or is not the same with a previous resource group you've created before, so Azure doesn't conflict which is which. So we've already selected the resource group here. The next thing we want to do is to give our virtual machine a name. So we might want to just choose my virtual machine or my Azure VM here. So we're going to select region. So because I'm in Africa, so I'll have to select a region that is closest to me. So let's say we have an application that we have built for people in Nigeria or South Africa or somewhere in Africa or close to Africa. We'll be using a region that is closest to our customers, and South Africa North is the closest region. Then the next thing we want to select is availability option. So this is just a basic virtual machine for demo, so we won't be needing anything like backups or infrastructure redundancy. So we'll just choose no infrastructure redundancy required here, and we're going to select this. So the next thing is security type. So we'll use this trusted launch virtual machine, or we just go over to use basic level of security for our virtual machines. So we can just choose the standard security type. Then after this, we'll choose our machine image. So this by default, because mostly I use Ubuntu, I use a Linux system, so I'm always very conversant with the command line in Linux, and also most of my virtual machines created before now, I'm using this Ubuntu server as my virtual machine image. But if you do not want to use Ubuntu, you want to use something like Kali, you want to use something like maybe Windows or Fedora, or this is for Kali, Debian, Red Hat, Oracle, Windows, and all. So you can choose the operating system that you need for your Linux and the Linux environment that you intend to have. So basically it's Ubuntu here, so we'll just leave it back at Ubuntu. And the virtual machine architecture that I would want is 64-bit architecture. So if you're using ARMD 64, you can choose, but I'm using x64, so mostly I'll just leave it at this. It's already here by default. So now we're going to choose the size. So this is a demo we are doing, so we do not need much. So this $4.96 a month is what is the slowest in terms of cost for Azure Virtual Machines. So with this, we are getting one core CPU, we are getting 0.5 gigabyte of memory and all. So we are going to just choose the smallest one to keep things simple. So if you look at this, you're seeing that this is something this is the complete build that would get in a month with this resource that we've created or we are creating, right? So we need to keep things simple. So this is where the cross lies. So this is where we want to choose our authentication type for the SSH. So you either choose to use SSH public key. If you go through the channel, you're going to see a video on how you can use SSH public key. But for this purpose of this demo, we are going to use password. So here we are going to choose username and password. So if you click on here, it will prompt us to create a username and then password. So this is the username or the user that we are going to create for the virtual machine upon creation of that virtual machine. So every operating system has users by default. It has the admin user and then it has the regular user. So from that regular user, you can be able to do whatever you want to do. It's in Windows, it's in Linux. So the basic user that the virtual machine is going to be created with, so it's that user that will want to create or perhaps want to give it a name. So here you can choose maybe Azure user or VM user, just any name. There's no particular convention on how you you create a username and all. So here we are going to create a password. So you also want to use a password that is not easily guessable and something you can always remember. So here I'm going to give this password and we'll confirm by typing it back again. So a password we have assigned a password for this user. So this is where we choose our inbound post rules. So we're going to just public inbound rules. We're going to choose leave it at allow selected ports. So the inbound rules, we already have SSH here by default. So you may also want to check HTTPS, HTTP, but we won't be doing anything that requires us to go to the internet. So we can just leave it at SSH, but checking this does not really make a difference, right? So once this is done, we'll just hit on review and create. So it's going to have to pass a validation test before we can be able to go ahead to create the virtual machine. So let's wait a bit. All right, so the validation failed. So we'll have to go back to the basics to know why it failed or something we didn't do right. So it says changing basic options may reset the selection if made. Review all options before creating virtual machine. So, okay, let's look at it again. SSH public key and now let me change this to, I think I once deleted that resource book, so I think that may be why it didn't create on the go. So let's look at it again. Everything looks good. Let's go back to review and create. All right, so it didn't it didn't show any errors now. So it says you have set SSH open to the internet, which means anybody that has our username and our password can be able to SSH into this virtual machine. So security best practice, right? We should be able to map out an IP address for a particular machine that would connect to the virtual machine, but that is for something that has to do with critical or sensitive workloads. So this is just a demo. It doesn't need much. So hit on create and then go ahead to create our virtual machine. So initializing deployments, most times, depending on the bandwidth, this may take some time. So we'll just have to pause the video and revert back. All right, so we've been able to have the virtual machine successfully created. So from here we can go to resource, or click on resource here, or click on overview to get us into the virtual machine that we've created. So this is where you can maybe reconfigure or add IAM tags, or just pretty much do some configurations, additional configurations to the virtual machines, or change some settings and all, right? So, but to connect to this virtual machine, what we'll do is to click on connect here, and it's going to bring two options for us. So SSH using Azure CLI, or SSH using native SSH. So we're going to select this, and this is the public IP address of the virtual machine. So you can copy this and go to the terminal to use your SSH command, but do not worry if you don't know how to, or if you do not know the SSH command, or if you think the command is going to be difficult for you. So look at this space, right? So if we created this virtual machine using a public key, we would have to go into this folder where we have SSH ID rsa.pem, right? But we didn't create that. We're just going to use the basic one, which is username and password. Just copy this simple command here, and come to the terminal here. Open terminal from your local machine. So we'll just use SSH and paste in the username and the IP address. So it's supposed to add this IP address to a list of known hosts. So it's asking us to type in yes, so it's go ahead to do that, and it's going to prompt us to add the password. So the password that you set when you were creating the virtual machine, and this should be able to get us into the virtual machine that we created. So this is the local machine, right? So this is VM user Azure VM, right? So if I try to open another page or terminal page by the side, so this page is logged in my local machine, right? So this is VM Azure VM. So anything you want to install, anything you want to download, you can do it from the Azure VM. And if you do not have you're not using a Linux operating system, you are using something like Windows, and you also want to practicalize this, you can just come back to Azure. There is a cloud shell here, so maybe this page is still very important to you, so you might just want to open in a new tab. And when you do this, you are going to be able to use this cloud shell. So it's opening a terminal shell here. So let's give it a little time for it to come out. All right, so what we're going to do now is to use the same command, SSH user at IP address, this command that we copied from here, and come back to the cloud shell and do SSH. Then think there's a space that shouldn't be here. All right, so also add this to the list of known hosts and put the password. So Azure VM user at my Azure VM. The same thing we have here, VM user at my Azure VM. So my Azure VM is representing the IP address, this IP address that we put in here, right? So that is the name of the VM, right? So if we try to maybe create a file here, touch file.txt, the file will get created. If you come back to this shell, the cloud shell, and do ls, you also see that the file.txt was created. So if we try to create a file here as well, maybe touch my file.txt, And when you come back to this place and do ls, so you have my file.txt you created from the Cloud Shell and file.txt that you created from when you logged in using your local command line. If you found this tutorial useful, kindly help my growing channel by subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and sharing with your friends. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.